If you've ever wondered why men transform into mythological predators the moment a woman shows the slightest disinterest, but then collapse into trembling bureaucrats the moment she actually requires consistency, understand this. Men worship the pursuit, but choke on the responsibility. Their fantasies are made of motion, not maintenance. They crave the hunt because it flatters their primitive illusions. But the moment the chase ends, they feel a cold tap on the shoulder from reality, reminding them that a lure requires upkeep, and upkeep requires discipline. And if there is one thing men avoid more than accountability, it is the tedious burden of sustained effort. This is the paradox that governs male desire. They want the woman they can conquer, but they fear the woman they must keep. And if that sentence stings, good. It means your mind isn't too numb to recognize the mechanics I'm about to expose. Let's begin with a truth men hope no one ever articulates. The chase is the only time they feel powerful. The rest of the relationship is an ongoing war with their own inadequacy. The pursuit allows them to dramatize themselves as heroic strategists, poised conquerors, master seducers. But once they win, once the woman actually accepts them, the fantasy dissolves like cheap paper in water. Suddenly they are faced with the very thing they've evaded their entire lives, the need to perform consistently. They cannot rely on adrenaline. They cannot rely on novelty. They cannot rely on the seductive fog of uncertainty. Maintenance is the enemy of illusion. This is why men cling to the chase with religious devotion. It allows them to express desire without exposing their fragility. It permits them to exert control without proving competence. It gives them the illusion of dominance without the labor of sustaining it. A man in pursuit feels like a god. A man in a relationship feels like an intern with a clipboard he never asked for. The psychoanalytic research has already confirmed what anyone with observational skills can see. A 2015 study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that men experience heightened dopamine activation when pursuing uncertain rewards compared to stable ones. In plain language, men are more stimulated by what might be theirs than by what is theirs. Uncertainty electrifies them. Stability sedates them. The chase intoxicates them. The maintenance sobers them up. And no drunk man enjoys sobriety. Of course, men will deny all of this. They will claim that they are not wired this way, that they just lost interest, that the woman changed, that timing was off, that the universe whispered something about focusing on themselves. The excuses are endless, but the truth behind them is painfully simple. Once a man realizes he cannot coast, he flees. Once he realizes the performance must continue long after the curtain rises, he begins looking for exits. The chase is the only stage where he feels confident enough to play the role he imagines himself to be. This is why women who understand this dynamic rarely lose control. They don't take male pursuit seriously, because they know it is the easiest phase of the entire romantic life cycle. Any man with a pulse can chase. The chase is free. It costs nothing but a few texts, a sprinkle of charm, and the illusion of effort. But maintenance? That requires psychological stamina. It requires emotional discipline. It requires the ability to withstand the quiet terror of being truly seen. Most men are allergic to being seen. So when you hear a man brag about his conquests, understand that he is boasting about the part of the game that requires the least strength. It is like listening to someone brag about stretching before the workout. The chase is foreplay for the ego. Maintenance is the actual performance. Only one of these phases reveals a man's true nature. This is why the women who master this dynamic are the ones men can never quite get over. Not because they play hard to get, but because they play hard to keep. They understand that desire isn't maintained through generosity but through selective scarcity. They know that a man's attention is a flame that dims when fed and blazes when starved. They do not give him the satisfaction of decaying into predictability. They don't audition for the role of girlfriend, like timid interns hoping to be hired. They study him with the same cold precision he believes he hides behind. Men call these women dangerous. A more accurate term would be trained. The truth is, a woman who knows how to maintain distance while offering presence, warmth while preserving mystery, access while retaining autonomy, such a woman is a threat to a man's psychological equilibrium. She becomes the impossible prize, not the one he chases, but the one he cannot fully obtain, even when she is in his arms. And men hate nothing more than ambiguity they cannot dominate. Observe how quickly a man shifts the moment the chase ends. His texts become slower, his calls shorter, his energy less urgent. You will hear the same patterns every time. Work got busy. He's overwhelmed. He doesn't want to rush things. He needs balance. He's just seeing where things go. In reality, he's experiencing the adrenaline crash that inevitably follows victory. He conquered the mountain, and now it's just a mountain. Solid, stable, predictable. No more cliffs to climb. No more mysteries to unravel. No more ego stimulation. The silence after conquest is intolerable for men, and that silence often becomes the breeding ground for sabotage. Men will ruin what they once pursued, simply to recreate the thrill of losing it. They will destabilize the relationship because they cannot manage the boredom of stability. They will pick fights, withdraw affection, create distance, or behave erratically, not because they've stopped caring, but because they are trying to reignite the chase. In their minds, the more chaotic the relationship becomes, the more alive they feel. They need emotional carnage to simulate passion. And women, unaware of this pattern, blame themselves for a man's inevitable restlessness. They think they did something wrong. They think they weren't enough. They think the intimacy changed things. They twist themselves into knots, trying to resurrect the version of him who once cared, not realizing that version was an actor performing a role he cannot sustain. Women often forget that men are sprinters, not marathoners. The chase is a burst of energy. Maintenance is a marathon of emotional endurance. The average man is not equipped for marathons. He gasps, panics, and collapses under the pressure of continuance. But the women who understand this do not chase after his collapsing interest. They do not attempt resuscitation. They observe. They adjust. They position themselves as a resource he cannot replace, but also cannot fully possess. These are the women who inspire obsession, not simply desire. Because obsession is born not from the chase, but from the mystery of maintenance. A mystery men are not intellectually or emotionally equipped to solve. And the men know it. They may not articulate it, but they feel it in the pit of their stomach. It's the quiet dread they experience when a woman stops over-investing. It's the panic that surfaces when she doesn't chase their withdrawal. It's the creeping paranoia when they realize she has options. Their fear is not losing the woman. They've lost plenty before. Their fear is losing the narrative, losing the illusion of superiority, losing the psychological territory they claimed during the chase. Maintenance threatens masculine delusion. Chase flatters it. That is why they love one and fear the other. If you've ever wondered why men transform into mythological predators the moment a woman shows the slightest disinterest, but then collapse into trembling bureaucrats the moment she actually requires consistency. Understand this. Men worship the pursuit, but choke on the responsibility. Their fantasies are made of motion, not maintenance. They crave the hunt because it flatters their primitive illusions. But the moment the chase ends, they feel a cold tap on the shoulder from reality, reminding them that a lure requires upkeep, and upkeep requires discipline. And if there is one thing men avoid more than accountability, it is the tedious burden of sustained effort. This is the paradox that governs male desire. They want the woman they can conquer, but they fear the woman they must keep. And if that sentence stings, good. It means your mind isn't too numb to recognize the mechanics I'm about to expose. Let's begin with a truth men hope no one ever articulates. The chase is the only time they feel powerful. The rest of the relationship is an ongoing war with their own inadequacy. The pursuit allows them to dramatize themselves as heroic strategists, poised conquerors, master seducers. But once they win, once the woman actually accepts them, the fantasy dissolves like cheap paper in water. Suddenly they are faced with the very thing they've evaded their entire lives, the need to perform consistently. They cannot rely on adrenaline. They cannot rely on novelty. They cannot rely on the seductive fog of uncertainty. Maintenance is the enemy of illusion. This is why men cling to the chase with religious devotion. It allows them to express desire without exposing their fragility. It permits them to exert control without proving competence. It gives them the illusion of dominance without the labor of sustaining it. A man in pursuit feels like a god. A man in a relationship feels like an intern with a clipboard he never asked for. The psychoanalytic research has already confirmed what anyone with observational skills can see. A 2015 study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that men experience heightened dopamine activation when pursuing uncertain rewards compared to stable ones. In plain language, men are more stimulated by what might be theirs than by what is theirs. Uncertainty electrifies them. Stability sedates them. The chase intoxicates them. The maintenance sobers them up. And no drunk man enjoys sobriety. Of course, men will deny all of this. They will claim that they are not wired this way, that they just lost interest, that the woman changed, that timing was off, that the universe whispered something about focusing on themselves. The excuses are endless, but the truth behind them is painfully simple. Once a man realizes he cannot coast, he flees. Once he realizes the performance must continue long after the curtain rises, he begins looking for exits. The chase is the only stage where he feels confident enough to play the role he imagines himself to be. This is why women who understand this dynamic rarely lose control. They don't take male pursuit seriously because they know it is the easiest phase of the entire romantic life cycle. Any man with a pulse can chase. The chase is free. It costs nothing but a few texts, a sprinkle of charm, and the illusion of effort. But maintenance? That requires psychological stamina. It requires emotional discipline. It requires the ability to withstand the quiet terror of being truly seen. Most men are allergic to being seen. So when you hear a man brag about his conquests, understand that he is boasting about the part of the game that requires the least strength. It is like listening to someone brag about stretching before the workout. The chase is foreplay for the ego. Maintenance is the actual performance. Only one of these phases reveals a man's true nature. This is why the women who master this dynamic are the ones men can never quite get over. Not because they play hard to get, but because they play hard to keep. They understand that desire isn't maintained through generosity but through selective scarcity. They know that a man's attention is a flame that dims when fed and blazes when starved. They do not give him the satisfaction of decaying into predictability. They don't audition for the role of girlfriend, like timid interns hoping to be hired. They study him with the same cold precision he believes he hides behind. Men call these women dangerous. A more accurate term would be trained. The truth is, a woman who knows how to maintain distance while offering presence, warmth while preserving mystery, access while retaining autonomy, such a woman is a threat to a man's psychological equilibrium. She becomes the impossible prize, not the one he chases, but the one he cannot fully obtain, even when she is in his arms. And men hate nothing more than ambiguity they cannot dominate. Observe how quickly a man shifts the moment the chase ends. His texts become slower, his calls shorter, his energy less urgent. You will hear the same patterns every time. Work got busy. He's overwhelmed. He doesn't want to rush things. He needs balance. He's just seeing where things go. In reality, he's experiencing the adrenaline crash that inevitably follows victory. He conquered the mountain, and now it's just a mountain. Solid, stable, predictable. No more cliffs to climb. No more mysteries to unravel. No more ego stimulation. The silence after conquest is intolerable for men, and that silence often becomes the breeding ground for sabotage. Men will ruin what they once pursued, simply to recreate the thrill of losing it. They will destabilize the relationship, because they cannot manage the boredom of stability. They will pick fights, withdraw affection, create distance, or behave erratically, not because they've stopped caring, but because they are trying to reignite the chase. In their minds, the more chaotic the relationship becomes, the more alive they feel. They need emotional carnage to simulate passion. And women, unaware of this pattern, blame themselves for a man's inevitable restlessness. They think they did something wrong. They think they weren't enough. They think the intimacy changed things. They twist themselves into knots, trying to resurrect the version of him who once cared, not realizing that version was an actor performing a role he cannot sustain. Women often forget that men are sprinters, not marathoners. The chase is a burst of energy. Maintenance is a marathon of emotional endurance. The average man is not equipped for marathons. He gasps, panics, and collapses under the pressure of continuance. But the women who understand this do not chase after his collapsing interest. They do not attempt resuscitation. They observe. They adjust. They position themselves as a resource he cannot replace, but also cannot fully possess. These are the women who inspire obsession, not simply desire. Because obsession is born not from the chase, but from the mystery of maintenance. A mystery men are not intellectually or emotionally equipped to solve. And the men know it. They may not articulate it, but they feel it in the pit of their stomach. It's the quiet dread they experience when a woman stops over-investing. It's the panic that surfaces when she doesn't chase their withdrawal. It's the creeping paranoia when they realize she has options. Their fear is not losing the woman. They've lost plenty before. Their fear is losing the narrative, losing the illusion of superiority, losing the psychological territory they claimed during the chase. Maintenance threatens masculine delusion. Chase flatters it. That is why they love one and fear the other. But let's peel back another layer of this psychological onion, the one most people avoid because it smells too much like truth. Men do not simply fear maintenance because it requires effort. They fear it because maintenance exposes the contradiction they spend their entire lives hiding. They want devotion from women they themselves would never have the emotional stamina to devote themselves to. They demand loyalty while treating it like a burden. They crave admiration, but resent the responsibility that admiration requires. They want to be chosen, but panic when they realize they must then behave like someone worth choosing. It is easier for them to be the fantasy than to sustain it. A man in the chase phase is a caricature of confidence, charming, decisive, purposeful. But a man in the maintenance phase is confronted with the raw truth of who he actually is. Maintenance forces him to reveal his limitations, his insecurities, his emotional anemia. It forces him to confront a terrifying possibility, that the woman he pursued might actually expect him to deliver something beyond initial enthusiasm. And nothing terrifies a man like being expected to follow through. The chase gives him a narrative in which he is the protagonist. Maintenance gives him a mirror in which he is merely human. This is why a man's enthusiasm evaporates the moment he gets what he wanted. Not because desire died naturally, but because it cannot survive the scrutiny of proximity. Desire is a peacock. Intimacy is an X-ray. Proximity dismantles illusion, and men are built on illusions like scaffolding. Remove one beam, and they crumble. This is why they prefer the thrill of potential over the obligation of reality. Potential flatters their fantasy self. Reality exposes their incompetence. Watch how a man behaves once emotional maintenance becomes necessary. He'll begin pacing the confines of the relationship like a trapped animal. He feels cornered, not by the woman, but by the expectation that he must now be consistent in ways he has never trained himself to be. The chase requires only impulse. Maintenance requires repetition, and repetition is where men die. Most women don't understand this. They think men are commitment phobic. They're not. They're consistency phobic. There's a difference. Commitment is a decision. Consistency is a discipline. Men are perfectly capable of committing, at least verbally. It makes them look honorable, noble even. But consistency has no audience. It is performed backstage, without applause, without validation. It demands that a man show up repeatedly, even when he no longer feels the emotional adrenaline of the chase. That type of discipline is rare, and rarer still among men accustomed to winning women with charm instead of stability. Men fear maintenance because it humbles them. The chase elevates them. Maintenance exposes them. In the chase, they are the pursuer. In maintenance, they are the performer. And most men don't have enough depth to perform anything beyond the first act. They are sprinters, pretending to be marathoners, hoping the woman won't notice their stamina is imaginary. But the women who do notice, those are the ones men fear the most. There is a particular coldness in a woman who can see a man's psychological limitations without despising him for them. She doesn't nag or demand. She simply watches, and that quiet observation terrifies him far more than any argument ever could. A woman who sees his patterns is already ahead of him. She cannot be manipulated with future promises or emotional theatrics. She cannot be impressed by the chase, because she knows it is the male equivalent of fireworks, loud, bright, and ultimately useless. She doesn't melt under pressure. She calibrates. She strategizes. She stays one step removed, not out of coldness, but out of clarity. And clarity is the one thing men fear in women more than beauty, ambition, or independence. Because clarity means she sees him not as he hopes to be seen, but as he actually is. A woman with clarity becomes psychologically dangerous. She cannot be seduced by the thrill of the hunt, and she cannot be pacified by the comfort of routine. She sits in the middle, aware, detached, and unpredictable. Men crave predictable women because predictable women validate their delusions. But the unpredictable woman? She becomes the source of a man's deepest paranoia. She disrupts the narrative he built during the chase. She refuses to collapse into the maintenance role he quietly hoped she'd embody. She does not worship him for the bare minimum gestures he once used to impress her. She requires something he never expected to give: presence. Emotional presence is the maintenance skill most men lack. A man can chase while emotionally absent. He cannot maintain without emotional involvement. And emotional involvement exposes men to a terrifying reality. They might be outmatched. Because once emotions enter the arena, women have the evolutionary advantage. Women are socialized in emotional endurance. Men are socialized in emotional theatrics. One is survival. The other is showmanship. But showmanship has an expiration date. Maintenance does not. This is why many men sabotage the relationship the moment it requires emotional presence. They retreat into silence, become distant, or drown themselves in distractions. They rediscover old hobbies. They text old flames. They need space, or need clarity, as though clarity is found in avoidance. They think distance will make them feel powerful again. What they don't realize is that distance is merely the beginning of their irrelevance. Women who understand this dynamic do not chase after distancing men. They let them drift. They let them feel the illusion of escape. They let them taste freedom, because freedom is the first step toward regret. A man does not realize the value of maintenance until he meets a woman who refuses to maintain him. The most psychologically devastating thing a woman can do is allow a man to experience the consequences of his inconsistency. He will wander. He will explore. He will convince himself he is happier unburdened. But the moment he encounters a new woman, one who demands the same maintenance he fled from, the panic returns. The chase begins again, and he feels alive for a moment. But then the cycle repeats. The high fades. The maintenance returns. And he realizes with sinking dread that the problem was never the woman. The problem was his inability to sustain the persona he performed during the chase. This realization is what drives men back to women who once understood them. Not because they suddenly matured, but because they crave the illusion of who they were when they pursued her. They want to feel potent again. They want to reclaim the version of themselves they could only access through pursuit. They want to prove, even if only to themselves, that they can do better this time. But women who understand the game know better than to believe this comeback. They don't punish him. They don't reward him. They observe his return like one observes a recurring illness, predictable, inconvenient, and curable only through distance. Yet ironically, it is these women, the ones who refuse to maintain men, that men become addicted to. Because nothing haunts a man more than a woman he couldn't reduce to a routine. The chase is addicting. The maintenance is suffocating. And the woman who requires both is unforgettable. But let's address the final, uncomfortable truth. The one men hope stays buried beneath layers of motivational nonsense and performative masculinity. Men don't merely love the chase. They depend on it to hide from the suffocating realization that they have no internal architecture capable of sustaining real intimacy. The chase is their camouflage. Maintenance is their exposure. And exposure is death to the man who has never examined himself beyond surface-level ambition and borrowed swagger. A man in pursuit is animated by fantasy. A man in maintenance is haunted by reality. Think about it. The very moment a woman begins to feel comfortable, stable, emotionally nourished, that's when men begin to panic. It's not the woman's comfort that scares them. It's their own inadequacy that begins crawling out of the shadows the moment the noise of pursuit dies down. When the fireworks fade, the silence forces them to confront themselves. And the last person most men want to be alone with is themselves. The chase keeps the internal void distracted. Maintenance shines a spotlight on it. This is why men suddenly become philosophers of timing, alignment, and not forcing things the moment a woman expects basic consistency. This is why they start acting like monks discovering enlightenment every time emotional responsibility appears on the horizon. They'll quote stoicism while having zero command of their own impulses. They'll preach about their journey while walking in circles. They'll pretend they're protecting their peace when in reality they're running from their own lack of emotional infrastructure. Maintenance doesn't demand perfection. It demands presence. But presence is where men die, because presence removes the mask. And that mask, oh, it's everything to them. The mask is what makes them appear stronger than they feel. The mask is what convinces women they are more confident than they actually are. The mask is what carries them through the chase like an actor in a well-rehearsed role. But maintenance requires authenticity, not acting. And authenticity demands that the man expose the insecurities he's been concealing since adolescence. Most men would rather destroy the relationship than expose the wound. Here's the irony, though. Women think men run from maintenance because they don't want the responsibility. But the truth is far darker. They run because maintenance makes them emotionally legible. And a legible man is a vulnerable man. When a woman sees him clearly, when she understands his patterns, when she predicts his reactions, his self-mythologizing collapses under its own weight. He is no longer the mysterious hunter. He is the predictable creature who can't sit still without external stimulation. This is why some women become addicted to the chase as well. They confuse the man's theatrics with depth. They think his pursuit signals emotional investment, when in reality, it only signals arousal. And arousal is not the same as intention. But the women who've studied men, who've watched them enough to understand the difference between emotional availability and emotional performance, these women become immune to the chase. They don't fall for the early intensity. They don't melt under grand gestures. They don't mistake urgency for commitment. They watch the man in silence, waiting for the moment he must prove himself through maintenance, rather than performance. This is where the real game begins. Not in the chase. Anyone can chase. The real game begins when a man must sustain what he initiated. And most men simply lack the stamina. Their attraction thrives in chaos, uncertainty, distance, and emotional tension. The moment you remove those elements and offer warmth, stability, and receptivity, they short-circuit. Their nervous system knows how to pursue the unavailable. It has no software for maintaining the available. This is why the best strategy for women is not to withhold affection, but to withhold predictability. Predictability is the graveyard of male desire. Once he knows the pattern, he disengages. Once he anticipates the rhythm, he becomes restless. Once he feels secure, he feels numb. The chase provided stimulation. Predictability provides silence. And silence is where the man's inner boredom, the boredom he's been escaping his whole life, comes to devour him. But the woman who understands this dynamic doesn't punish him for it. She simply doesn't rearrange her identity to soothe his deficiencies. She does not degrade herself into emotional life support. For a man who confuses comfort with captivity. Instead, she positions herself as the kind of woman who can be close while remaining elusive. Not because she's playing games, but because she refuses to collapse her world into his. A woman who maintains her mystery maintains her power. Not because she's manipulating him, but because she refuses to enter the role that kills his desire. She refuses to become the caretaker of his emotional laziness. She maintains her autonomy, and autonomy is the one thing men cannot easily categorize or control. Men don't fall in love with women who chase them. They fall in love with women who make them question themselves. That questioning is the oxygen of male desire. And maintenance, when done well, is not about consistently giving. It's about consistently not shrinking. Not shrinking your standards. Not shrinking your life. Not shrinking your ambitions. Not shrinking your expectations. Men don't fall for women who accommodate their deficiencies. They fall for women who expose them. Because exposure disrupts their illusion. It forces evolution. And listen closely. The man who truly desires you will rise to the demand of maintenance. Not because you beg, not because you plead, but because the psychological discomfort of losing you outweighs the emotional laziness he's been hiding behind. He will rise not because he's a saint, but because the alternative is becoming another man, haunted by the memory of a woman he couldn't keep. Every man has one. Some have many. So let's close this out with a final, brutal truth. The chase reveals his desire. The maintenance reveals his character. One is biological. The other is psychological. One is instinct. The other is discipline. And discipline is where the game is won. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe. Don't just watch these breakdowns. Actually join the audience that studies human psychology with intent. And go to the description and the pinned comment. My landing page is finished. Read the free PDF I put there. Watch the video. Subscribe to the newsletter so you stay ahead of the game instead of repeating the same mistakes. And pre-order the landing page project, The Feminine Game. That's where the real depth is. That's where the courses are. And yes, the coaching link is pinned in the comments too. Now tell me in the comments, which side of this equation have you seen more? Men addicted to the chase, or men terrified of the maintenance? Let's see who's honest enough to answer.